Hey, Blockhead Traders. Here at Blockhead Traders, I must inform you that we are not financial professionals. Nothing we say should be considered financial advice. We offer our own thoughts and opinions to you, the viewer. We expect you to take these opinions and form your own financial conclusions and make your own financial decisions. Today is Wednesday, April 20th, 2022, and this is Blockhead Traders Weekly. In this week's episode, I am joined by fellow Blockhead trader Viper XL 007, and we are going to go back a little bit longer to do a reflection on some crypto games, notably the Roostr Mint that we recorded live last week and put out. And we just kind of want to touch on a couple of other games that are out there. I know that it might seem like we touched on a lot of rosy pictures in this kind of crypto gaming series, but we don't want to cast the light that that's really all that's out there. There's a lot of doom and gloom and projects that are going nowhere and places that you'll just sink money in. And so I think we want to visit some of that stuff and talk a little bit about that this week. Well, Viper, take me through a little bit of this recap here, and how do you want to approach this topic this week?
Yeah, so I was reflecting on where we've been on this crypto journey. I think we've basically captured two what I think are very complete series. The first series was very educational on the technology of the blockchain. I think Sprocket summed it up very well on the practical implications of that technology and how we use it and how we, all of that. You should go back. If you haven't watched that series, at least go back and watch the recap episode at the end of the series and then decide if you want to go deeper or not, because the previous episodes we went a little deeper. This current series that we're now on the tail end of was more like, all right, now let's just go all in. Let's go all the way down the rabbit hole. We are sitting on a blockchain on the Avalanche network. We are interacting with decentralized applications, playing the game, investing real money, and getting after it. And so what I was really, I don't say nervous, but just very attentive to was the fact that, like Sprocket said, we've kind of painted somewhat of a rosy picture of like, Chikn's great. Look at this. It's so much fun. I mean, I'm genuinely having fun in the Chikn game and introducing Sprocket to it. But the last 6 months of me rooting around the darkest corners of this thing have not been that rosy. And I wanted to make sure that we absolutely called that out and really showed why it is so vitally important that when you go down here, you are playing with your highest speculative risk tolerance amount of money. And, for me, I'm not throwing around money that I need every month. I'm not throwing around money that is normally attributed to bills or whatever. This is money that I entered holding it saying, I accept. I don't plan, but I accept if I lose this. And that is critical, because what I want to cover now are just mentioning just what a complete scum project looks like, pure scam. And there are a lot of those currently, unfortunately. Kind of go over a couple other projects that kind of wooed me in a lot of ignorance, that I wasn't thinking through some critical things you need to think through on these games. But they weren't scams. They were just poorly executed. And then kind of wrap it up with our favorite topic of Chikn, and kind of go over why is Chikn feel so different. And there are several other projects that are just as successful as Chikn. I'm just not currently playing them. So it's not like you have to get in here and get into Chikn. Like, there are other good ones here. And I think it's been out long enough that there's a couple things we can really gain by studying Chikn and what works, and use that to formulate our expectation for other games and whether they're worth getting into or not. So the first game that I'm actually not even going to pull up, because I wasn't in it personally, was something called Street Brawlers. That was a particular just straight up cash grab scam They basically copied all the documentation, and I picked this one specifically because they copied all the documentation from Hopper's game, which we covered in a previous episode. They copied the documentation and just tried to change the names of the token, but kept all the same language, all the same mechanics. And even in some places in their documents, they still left the reference to the fly token, which is Hopper's token, instead of their own, whatever it was, brawl token or whatever. And so they minted, and it actually popped up on my radar slightly. There were some people that were in various circles that I was in were like, hey, did you hear about Street Brawlers? You know, it was like taking on this sort of Street Fighter theme, 8-bit, you know, kind of cool art. And some people minted it. I mean, I don't know if it minted out or not, but it definitely minted. They took money and then essentially, ran away with it. And I personally haven't been in a straight up rug yet. It's out there. It's just a risk. But I have been in projects that have done nothing. The very first NFT I ever minted was supposed to be a game. It was actually on the Ethereum network, so I'm kind of glad it never became a game because gas fees. And it's done nothing, literally nothing. But it's also not quite a rug because the dev is still there-ish and, you know, supposedly completely rebranding and whatever. But so it's a weird gray area that, you know, this is some of the tolerance you have to have. So the first game, though, that I want to get into, because I feel glad that we kind of averted it for Sprocket here, because right when Sprocket was getting ready to get into Chikn, he was like, I'm ready. You know, he watched me go through it. I mentioned this game, Police and Thief, to him. I was like, they had a phase 1 and they're going into phase 2. And phase 2, they're doing a lot of the Chikn tokenomics, the tokenomics. You might want to consider it as a way cheaper option to get into the same gameplay. And I went so far as to buy a Thief NFT for him because I was sniping some good deals, I thought. And I was like, you know what? If he's interested, I'll just send him a Thief or two. Just let him start to get his feet wet. We avoided that. And luckily, but just real quick at a very, very high level, you know, this phase 1, and it's important to capture what happened in phase 1. And first of all, one of the things that brought me to this, and this is not a great thing, it was the art. The style, this was very thematically attractive to me. And I do want to make sure I keep calling out this isn't a scam, or it's just poorly executed. So phase 1, I'm not going to read all of this, but there's a whole story here about what's going on thematically. And basically they had a 50,000 NFT set is what they were doing. 40,000 of those were thieves and 10,000 of those were police. And in phase 1, you can see what the token price is, or what the minting cost was. Mints 0 through 10,000 actually cost 1.7 AVAX. And then the rest of them were increasing amounts of the native token loot. And this is going to become important here. But 10 through 20,000, what cost you 20,000 loot, 20 through 40,000, 40, and then 60,000 loot. And when I actually minted mine, I minted at this 60,000 loot. I minted 3 of them. Just by luck of the draw, I minted 2 thieves and 1 police, and that was a fantastic combination of things to mint. It's not worth going into how the game was played, but what's important to note is all thieves, when you had them staked, they emitted 10,000 loot tokens per day. And so if we look at the loot chart here real quick, go back to the daily view so we can get all the way back in time. And yep, spoiler alert. Look at that. But going all the way back in time, when they were in phase 1, we were looking at, we'll call it an average price of 0.003 loot. And it spiked all the way up at its highest peak. We didn't quite get to 1 cent, but 0.006 cents. So if we look at some real quick math at just 0.003, and each of these NFTs were emitting 10,000 loot tokens per day, that was $30 per day that you were getting per thief that you had in your possession. So at one point I was getting $60 per day for my 2 thieves, and that was fixed. That was just a constant pump of tokens. And so, I mean, everybody's just, I mean, there were people that made stupid, insane amount of money on this when they minted 10, 20, 30 thieves. And so the price was held up because, like we said, there was this, in order to mint the NFT, you had to buy. So coming into this fresh, like I did, I minted in round 4 here at 60,000 loot. I had to come in and pay for 60,000 loot tokens just to mint. And so that is utility for the token. That is fresh money coming into the system. And then the token that's just inflation city. And it's being held up by the fact that people have to buy that token in order to mint the NFT. Plenty of red flags now in hindsight, but in the moment you get those emotions and you see those numbers. And I jumped in way late. There were like 2 days left of the game when I jumped in. So anyways, I'll probably leave it at that, but the long story short is that was insane inflation from round 1 because each of these NFTs is pumping 10,000 tokens per day. Even though loot was a capped thing like feed, like we've talked about in the Chikn game, it was capped, but it hit, like feed isn't going to hit its max supply until at least, well, it's not timed, but we're not even halfway through the feed distribution yet. Loot hit its max supply in about 2.5 months. So that is just a stupid amount of inflation with really zero utility other than to buy these NFTs, and thus an economics lesson on inflation and what that inevitably does to price. As we can see, the current price of loot, and we have to count these carefully, 0.001156 cents, and we're about to add another 0 here because it just keeps going down. So anyways, that was just fairly poor execution on what to do with the inflation, though I will give the dev credit on this project. He did say many, many times in many AMAs, he was like, guys, this is a lot of supply, but you guys are demanding that, we plow forward. And phase 2 was a copy of the Chikn tokenomics. He was like, I'm trying to tell you, this is a big problem that we have coming, but everybody was just rabid and they were like, do it. So he pushed, and this is obviously what happened. So in hindsight, I don't know. Do you regret not getting into police and thief, Sprocket?
I don't think. I mean, looking back, right? You're like, whew, glad I didn't do that. But and on the hindsight, what was going through my head, and I'll just kind of touch on it, is this space was unclear to me. I knew that I wanted to try to get in there. I knew that, hey, I want to do something. I had allocated a portion of funds, and I said, I'll just go in on this. We'll just pick one. We'll have fun with it. And I remember you kind of threw that curveball that day and said, hey, what about this game? And I was like, well, it seems similar. It's nicer. It's a lower price point. But in my mind, I'm like, I kind of have been reading up on Chikn. I kind of have been following it. I kind of get it. Okay, this is the same thing. I don't know a ton about it. I only have so many dollars. I don't really want to spread it out over lots of different projects and then, try to pour more money into one over the other. Like I had a finite amount, and I said, this is the thing. So, I didn't really get a buyer's remorse right away. I mean, it was kind of cool. I'm like, oh, wow, this seems neat. It's a lower price point. Maybe I could do both. And it was just, thinking in the back of my mind, that's not your game plan. Your game plan was, we're going to do this Chikn thing. You can see, evidence there. And so that's the thought that went through my head. Kind of looking at it, I just cannot help but draw the parallel to the real world economic learning here. Like in the economy right now, we poured money, tons of money into the economy during the pandemic, right? Mailing checks to people, giving tax breaks, giving us, we poured money, which is inflationary. And I think a lot of people don't really fully understand the long-term ramifications. Like it's kind of like a wildfire that, okay, yeah, it's burning a little bit, but when it starts catching, it feeds on itself and it grows exponentially to the point where when you then recognize there's a problem, you're kind of beyond where it's easy to remediate. And I think there's so many parallels here. And you look at, people blaming the Fed on how to get control of inflation. They have years and years of study and practice and all this stuff. And you're dealing with these games who, okay, they kind of get the concept. They read about it in Economics 101. And you see how quickly things can spiral out of control. And that's just, it's just this learning that I go back and say, somebody needs to kind of write some articles on some of this stuff to draw parallels, because I think it would really sink in with a lot of people that, hey, there's a connection here between what happens in these games and it's really modeling the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an actually very good unrehearsed transition to the next game. But the last thing I'm going to say about Police and Thief, hearing you recount how, like you said, it was a curveball. We were about to record your entry into Chikn just as Buying Egg, that very first episode we did. And I was like, hey, real quick before we start recording, do you want this thief? And there was a phrase you said in there of just, being new, exploring, knowing you wanted to, whatever that was. That is exactly, how you get into these projects. And that's fine. That's how I got into every single project that I'm in, for better or worse. Was I know I want to be here. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I know a couple things that would trigger my red flag warnings. So let's just kind of go from here. And like on Police and Thief, I wasn't thinking through. I didn't have that experience, or, some people would call it common sense, but I just kind of went in and got my hands dirty. And we've talked about this many times before with, when you're trading with real money versus paper money and all that kind of stuff. And then again, to bring back the phrase, playing with money you're willing to lose. And that is crucial because of this exact thing and learning experience. But to your point, actually real quick, one other game that is so sad, but and it's sad because, man, I wanted this game to be good. Like this game called Pizza Game. Just 8-bit pizza parlor. This was so cool. Not a scam, but same sort of thing. They even had additional mechanics to deal with the inflation, ways to use your pizza, ways to stake your pizza. Like staking your pizza was throwing it in the freezer to freeze it. And then ways that they, thematically tied that in. You'd pull your pizza out of the freezer, but you couldn't use it yet. You had to wait an entire 24 hours. It might have even been 48 hours for the pizza to thaw before you could actually sell it or trade it. It was very well thought out. But again, the issue here on these projects that I want to make sure I call out is this avalanche, no pun intended, but this waterfall of money being dumped into the project at excessive rates, which then causes a spike in price, which then causes a dump in price when the game was not designed to handle that influx of cash. And it was designed to emit this token like crazy. You get this values peak and then you crash and you never come back. And that's where we get these death charts of sorts. So the transition though, just talking about that inflation and not having a plan for it. This game here, Slime Shadies, the only reason I wanted to call this out was because I called it. I knew what was going to happen. I looked at this project because this project got a lot of hype because, these snails here, this is the art. of these NFTs. It's awesome art. I love it, just from an art perspective. And so it actually got a lot of traction in the space. A lot of well-known, respected people in the Avalanche play-to-earn space, gamify space, just really were hyped on this project. And from an art perspective, I get it. But I looked at their website initially, and so, it said tokenomics. And so this was as Pizza Game was unfolding and yada, yada, yada. I was like, all right, tell me about your tokenomics. I'm thinking I'm going to be smarter on this one. And so I look at it, and they have these mintonomics, which is basically just reflections. For every mint, they take, it's like 10% of the mint price, and they spread it out to everybody who's already minted. And so that's kind of a neat mechanic. Nothing to make a ton of money off of by any means, but, okay, it looks like 20% of the mint price. And then they had this Shady token, and the tokenomics of the Shady token. And I read this, and I was like, what are you doing with this token? Like, there's nothing here about how are we going to use this token. I was like, so wait a second. We're going to mint these snails, and they're just going to sit there and earn this Shady token, and that's it. That's all you have to say about it. There's a lottery that you could spend some Shady tokens and enter the lottery. Like, what? So initially, I was spot on. I was like, nope, I'm going to pass. But then through a different Discord server, I won a free mint. So I did come on mint day. I grabbed my free mint. And then again, some of those, notable people on the space, like one came swooping in, and he posted about how he minted 100 of them. And I was like, if he's in it. And I stopped thinking methodical. I got emotional. I didn't overinvest. I grabbed like 3 more. So I have 4 total. And they were a 1 AVAX mint price. So it was within my tolerance. But sure enough, let's look at the Shady token, and what it has done. And I mean, who could have guessed that this thing just bleeds? That's all there is to it. Because in this case, it was even more egregious because there was never utility for this. And that's why we see it launched. We had this spike, and then we're just off the cliff and down forever. But what I wanted to specifically call out about this is not being a scam, not being a rug. This project just wasn't properly executed. They weren't prepared for what they were about to do. They had great art. It was a very popular artist, and so it still stands as an art thing. And so what they're actually doing is they tried to tack a game on, and this was the part that what you said, Sprocket, made me think of it, was the downstream effects of this inflation. We've had months of this token being emitted out, and they came late to the party to make a game, and they did make a okay game. It's a little snail racer, and you spend Shady to get into the race, and they give you prize money in AVAX, so it's burnt Shady right away. But the problem, like you said, in the Fed and inflation that we deal with in real life, it's too late. There's already too much of this wildfire burning that you just can't do these last minute gimmicks and think you're going to attack this problem, which is still emitting itself. It's just, runaway train. And in this particular case, they at least recognize that they're going to, they're in the plans to completely revamp. They're going to do a 1-to-1 free swap. So if you're holding an old NFT, they're going to free swap you to a new NFT. They're going to relaunch a brand new token, and a game will be launched immediately with the new token, all that good stuff. Not saying anybody should get into this. I'm just kind of stuck in it because I can't really sell this thing. But I wanted to call it out because it's a really good example of inflation gets too late and you can't do anything about it, and you just have to nuke everything and start over. And that obviously doesn't really work in a lot of other real life places.
Yep, 100%. It's a lot like the analogy of kind of boiling a frog that you might have heard about. You know, the frog. You put a frog in a pot of water, and as you start to heat up the water, the frog doesn't realize that the water is getting too hot for him, and by the time he realizes that the water is too hot, it's too late to get out, and that's really what kind of happens in these situations. Everybody's like, "Oh, it's fine, it looks fine. It's, this is great. Everything's peachy keen." And then all of a sudden, when it collapses fast.
Yep. And your emotions kick in. I'm plenty guilty of it, where things start to go south and you're like, no, it's going to happen. They're going to turn around. You look at the chart, and like I've said before, reading charts for these games, I don't think is a thing. And so I'll be like, it's going to bounce off here and we're going to come back. It's going to be great. And it's not. It doesn't, because the problem is fundamental to economics. And so that actually brings us to real quick. I wanted to recap on hoppers, because we really talked up hoppers in our previous hoppers episode. But at the same time, I don't feel terrible. I don't feel like I misled anybody, because I laid out the warnings in that episode. And sure enough, what we can see is the fly token here. It's a little cut off the screen, but currently the fly token is trading at 16 cents, which is at least half the value it was in that video. But I think the video, it might have been a little bit higher. And these NFT prices are just hitting rock bottom. So these rarities, the common is 0.57, a rare hopper is 0.66, 0.9, 0.98 for epic. I mean, in the NFT space, these rarities mean something, and what we're seeing right here is these rarities mean nothing. They're all less than 1 AVAX. And by comparison, I had the opportunity in this game, that whole waterfall of immediate investment money. Man, I had the opportunity to sell my highest tiered hopper. The floor for my tier 4 hopper, which we talked about in that video, the floor hit 24 AVAX. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, I'm going to list it, but I'm going to list it at 26. And guess what never happened? The floor never got to 26. I mean, I did get out. I did, and this was the other thing I wanted to call out, because I was very much invested in the video when we posted it. I'm very much divested at this point. I've sold everything, and I sold it before we got to this low. I sold it when it was clear that this crash was coming and it was happening. And it's not, I still stand by everything I've said about the team behind this project, that they are very focused and devoted to making this project a success. However, I think they created 2 critical flaws that I wanted to call out here. One, we can't really see because I don't have any hoppers anymore. But I called out in the previous episode when you could level up your hopper. So you could go in here and you could upgrade him to the next level. The next level would emit more fly token. And problem number 1 that should have raised a flag but didn't. It did way in the back of my mind, but I completely shut that out. And that was that there was no cooldown period. You could just power through every level. And you could go all the way up to level 99, which is going to emit a crazy amount of fly. But in the back of my head, I was looking at this project like someone like me with a small amount of money coming into it would look at it. I was not looking at this project like a whale would look at it with a ton of money. And a whale at the beginning of the project is going to go, I'll throw down $10,000, buy the fly, and just power through those levels to really ramp up my fly emissions, because I'm going to do that first because I have the money to do that. And guess what? That's going to just rocket the price, because, it's not just going to be one whale out there. There's going to be a number of people trying to game that side of things. And so if we go look real quick at the token, we can see here that is exactly what happened. We launched this little, let me make it a little bit easier to see here. this initial lull right here was the pause of the game, which we talked about. There was a problem in the contract. They paused the whole game. We're going to fix that before we get going. So this ramp up, time and time again, every project you see this, which does mean there is a potential super uber duper high risk speculative opportunity to make some money. But this is the waterfall of money pouring into the project. This is the moment when, like I said, those whales and people coming in with a lot of money are spending tons of money to get the edge in the game, to get the emissions benefit to them, and then price skyrockets. And this is, we're looking at the 4-hour chart. So this top peak here is at least over the span of 3 or 4 days, where they can then harvest these mass emissions and sell them off, and then create sort of this downtrend. But at the same time, they've also contributed to the inflation problem, because these NFTs are constantly emitting a token, and they've just power leveled to the max on what that NFT is emitting. And so then it's just maximizing the inflation. This, I believe, is at least half of the problem.
Yeah, this initial pump that we see in a lot of these projects, we call it that inflation, your whale strategy that you bring up, where these whales kind of come in and they just dump a ton of money in them. This is actually very similar to things that happen in the equity world. And you did mention early in this episode, oh, well, you never see, companies just completely disappear overnight all the time. And I actually would say that's because in the equity world, we typically try to trade the big names, the high liquidity stocks. The phenomenon that we're seeing here with these whales kind of coming in with the money, what you're theorizing, is very, very similar to activity that happens in penny stocks all the time. And the penny stocks are basically those stocks that are like less than $5 per share. They typically have very low volume. They have low float. Low float just means the amount of free shares going around. And they're very susceptible to what's called a pump and dump. And it's a phenomenon where you get somebody with some big money comes in, they buy a large chunk of that float. And because there's not much of that float, and because the dollar amount is low, it's relatively easy for them to come in with, $50,000, $100,000 and influence that price, because they're severely impacting the supply and demand on the market, and that drives up the cost, which all of a sudden you get these kind of, lottery chasers, the retail traders or whoever coming and going, oh my gosh, it's going to the moon, it's taken off. I can invest 50 cents a share and it's going to go to $2. And they start coming in to buy. And that's when the people that created the pump, they jump. They basically dump all their shares. That's the dump part. Back into the market, and these kind of schmucks are still either buying them, but then there's not enough of them to absorb all the shares that this large money is coming in, and so the price collapses. And that's essentially what you're theorizing here, Viper, is you get all this money, this inflow, which drives up the price artificially, because they can impact it so much with the amount of money that they have relative to the market share. And then when they go to cash out, there's not enough buyers to pick up all the pieces. They are basically riding that wave, and they're the ones that are able to jump off the surfboard before the wave is gone, and everybody just stands there wet.
The other half, which is still one of my favorite features, however, I didn't fully think this through, this whole V-Fly thing that we talked about, which was you basically staked your fly token in order to earn this power voting token, which could increase your earnings on your staked hoppers. So again, thinking from my brain of a small bag coming into this game and saying, oh yeah, that's a really cool mechanic. That's going to limit people, because you're going to take your fly and the fly that you earned, and you're going to go stake it, earn this voting power. You're going to vote and slowly work your way up the ladder. Somebody coming in with a bunch of money is going to say right out of the gate, I mean, I'm just going to say they're bringing $20,000 into this project. 10,000 immediately, I'm going to buy fly and I'm going to power level. 10,000 immediately, I'm going to stake it in here, get a crazy voting power, and I'm going to vote, to increase my fly that I just power leveled, no cooldown period whatsoever. I just power leveled it. I'm going to amp it up with my voting power here and ride the wave. And so some of this is my theory, but also I think these were the two key loopholes in the system set up here that led to this. However, like I said, I do believe the team is committed enough to figure this out and get things back on track. I don't think it's completely lost yet. I don't think they're in panic mode, but me as a consumer in this space, I am plenty happy to be divested completely because, these are at prices now where the NFTs are worth at least a third of where I sold. So at least I feel like I got out at that time. But this was another one I wanted to highlight just how speculatively risky these new games can be, because I feel like I kind of talked it up in that episode about this game, and I do still love it, but they got some stuff they got to work through. So I know this game really intrigued you, Sprocket. I don't know if you're changing your thoughts or if it's just still the same, like you said, have the plan, stick to the plan kind of thinking, or if you're still looking for a bottom to maybe try it out when they get things figured out, or what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind, I really think some of their stuff they put in the tokenomics, I think is very unique. I think it could very well work. I'm still interested in it. But I am a very slow and methodical type of person when it comes to a lot of the investment and strategy. I really think I'm relatively good at keeping emotions out. It's pretty much impossible to keep emotions out. But I say all the time, people ask me, I got this trade idea. What do you think about this? And I'm like, that's a cool idea. But when are you going to get out? How are you going to get in? What's your plan? And I know on this show, I've talked about it. It's always, you got a plan, stick to your plan, and go with your plan. So for me, I'm not ready to ramp up my capital involvement in this crypto game space. So if I got into hoppers again, which I'm not ruling it out because, like I said, I'm still intrigues me, but it would come from scaling back Chikn or something. So I have my chunk of thing invested in crypto gaming now, and that's what I have. And you hear me talk about options, right? How boring is the way that I play options, but you know what? Slow and steady wins the race, man.
Very, very true. And I think for me personally, the thing hoppers taught me was it doesn't matter how well thought out a game is. Two things are going to happen. At least that I've seen in so many other games that I'm not even calling out here, or protocols or experiments, at least in this phase of crypto, which it's going to change and it's going to evolve and hopefully get more stable. I really feel like a lot of what we're showing here, a lot of what we're experiencing is just people experimenting with good intentions. So just completely ignore the bad actors, the scams, all that stuff. People are experimenting with good intentions about how to create an economic model. And these things are just going to show failure points. But the thing I'm learning is if a project is super hyped, just really like Hoppers was just, 7 minutes they minted out. That is crazy amount of hype, that if a project is that hyped in the community, there's going to be a spike. And, maybe it's crass, but that means there's going to be a flip opportunity. Like I said, that tier 4 hopper that I had, man, am I kicking myself that I could have easily sold it for 15 or 16 AVAX. When the floor was 24, if a 15, 16 popped on the market, bam, somebody's going to grab that because it looks like a deal. And that was where I really went wrong on hoppers. I didn't make it into mint, but I made it into a low entry, and the hype train kicked off and things went wild and emotions just sunk their teeth in. It was just, but I can't sell. What if this keeps going? What if that's irrational. It's not going to keep going. It was caused fundamentally by money piling in. So our favorite topic then, to wrap it up, Chikn and what we've learned so far, and why the heck is Chikn still going? Why have they not been, kind of massacred by this, everything we just talked about, of the best of intentions? So I guess before I give my thoughts, I don't know, Sprocket, if you have any read, because you have been in this project long enough now. I mean, you fresh minted your farmland, and then we just fresh minted our roosters. What are your thoughts on what sets Chikn apart? Why are they not just sustainable, but why are they thriving in this current space?
Yeah. So this is pure speculation on my part. But a couple of the observations that I've made with how they set some of the stuff up in the game. And you have to kind of remember, when they set some of the motion of how things are going to behave, all that gets embedded in these smart contracts. And these smart contracts, they're not the type of thing that you're like, oh yeah, whoops, we forgot to do that. Let's just go ahead and make a modification and push that out into production. It'll be fine. It's much more difficult to change, or it's kind of like, once you push the snowball down the hill, it's not going to stop rolling, and it's just going to keep going. And whatever direction you kind of push it, that's where you're headed. And I think one of the things, this is my personal opinion on a lot of these games, is it's really about the economics that I just told you. Like, how does the economy, how does the world react to the things you put in the game? And all of that has to be completed by some sort of simulation, some sort of modeling. And one of the observations that I've had with the Chikn project is they will delay events, delay milestones. They delayed the Roostr NFT. There's a delay in roosting the Roostr. And I think some of this stuff is they're playing out. There's a thing called like a Monte Carlo strategy, or a Monte Carlo, which is where you basically take all these different inputs and from different things, make different assumptions, and you track the output. It's a big statistical modeling thing. It's used a lot in options trading to figure out what's the probability of a particular outcome. And I have to believe that they come up with these theories on how they want their tokenomics to work, how they want these smart contracts to work, and they must be running them through a type of Monte Carlo simulation, where they're like, okay, given this, what's the most probable outcome of that? And to me, one of the biggest things that's going to set these people apart from the other ones is, I just think they fundamentally have more time, attention, thought, modeling capabilities in there. And they're making these tweaks behind the scene, because a lot of the details of what's coming up, they never tell you. They never tell you until hours before the event. And so I have to believe that in the background, these devs are going through this phasing, this step, and they're being very methodical on their approach, and they're not getting kind of as caught up in a lot of the hype. I think that's a real big key distinction. I mean, the other part is going to be the popularity, the drive, and maybe they set their token emission stuff so low that this initial pump that all these things seem to have, maybe it just goes on longer, and that's what we're stuck in right now. I don't know. But that's kind of my thought on what sets them apart. Is I believe they're modeling their theories and their designs better.
Yeah, and to your point, we've already minted roosters. We all own them. We can't roost them yet, but we don't know two key things. One, we don't know how much fertilizer these roosters are going to produce, which is a very important piece of the game. And in true form, because they did this with egg when the project officially launched, they're going to airdrop fertilizer to people and people with a farmland, and we still don't know how much fertilizer we're going to get. And, I mean, that's not, anything to cast doubt or anything on that. I think it's like you said, they are trying to ensure that whatever they do for the airdrop and whatever they do for the Roostr earning is thoroughly vetted and thoroughly understood what its impact is going to be on the environment.
Yeah, it'd be cool to get behind the scenes and see if our wild speculation, they could just be sitting around with a bunch of beer going, how about 55? Let's do 55.
Try 25%.
So who knows? But my experience says that this type of person on a project like this, crypto aside, it doesn't matter if this was crypto or any sort of endeavor, you want to execute it right. And the more research, thought, and stuff you put in, the better you do.
Yeah. And so the other thought I have as to why they've done so well is like we mentioned the first time we brought up Chikn on this channel. They are one of, the originator of this tokenomics idea, of this fact that and the tokens being the NFT is one token, egg and feed being the other tokens, and building this triangle symmetry. I do believe psychologically that they hit the market with this before anybody knew how to gamify it. And I think I might have mentioned this on the previous episode when we talked about Chikn, that by the time people figured out how to gamify it in a way that would have caused that initial spike and dump, or I should say runaway dump, because if you do look at the egg chart, it did spike. I mean, at one point, eggs were pushing $10 an egg, but we've reached a very stable $1 to $1.50. So a 10x decrease compared to Loot or those other games where it's been 100x decrease. It's been a ridiculously greater runaway train. So it did still happen, but I think it happened before people understood what was happening. And the other thing speaks to that idea of the modeling and the long-term planning of what they're doing and what they're trying to go for here, because we have 2 tokens currently. We'll have a third fertilizer very shortly. But the two tokens we have currently, egg and feed, they made them very simple in that one is inflationary and one is deflationary. So one will hit a max supply, and thus Sprocket's strategy of becoming the feed lord down the road. And it's almost like they were like, guys, what if we made an inflationary token and gave it so much utility that it acted deflationary? Could we do that? And I feel like that was almost like a conversation they had at the very, very beginning of the project, and everything is driving towards that goal of have an inflationary token, because that's going to keep people involved in the game to know that they can always produce this token, but give it so much utility that at times it will actually deflate supply, even though it's constantly being emitted. And that was, to me, we had a glimpse of that in the Roostr mint, as we saw previously, specifically what was the red carpet rollout of what they're going to call their Ignite platform, which is going to be that what you saw us do in the game playing of Roostr, where I believe I said the exact words, "This is a whales game. I'm not playing."
Egg rarity race.
Oh yeah, I do not care to participate in this. Just reading some of the rules. Yeah, this is. Let's be clear. This is a game for the egg whales right now, and I am nothing of an egg whale. So if I tried to participate in this, I guarantee you all I'm going to do is burn precious egg, 50, 70 egg, and get basically nothing out of it. When I could wait, let the whales fight it out for the super rare roosters and get a price appreciation and go home with some profits. And then we proceeded to both play this game. That is the platform they're going to roll out and make available to future NFT projects, specifically NFT projects that might be on like Ethereum right now, just not getting the traction they want because of gas fees or whatever. We're going to invite them over to the Avalanche ecosystem and help them launch. And they're going to do exactly what we just did with buying your rarity level in the mint. And they're going to do that, offer that as a service to these projects coming over. So what does that mean? Well, tie it back to everything I just talked about with inflation and utility. That Chikn as an ecosystem has had the waterfall of money pouring in. The floor price of chickens have gotten very high. So then came Roostr. And what did Roostr do? Roostr gave the opportunity for all new money to come in, even though a lot of us that existed there in the space before just bought roosters. As of right now, the marketplace tells you how many unique holders are holding a chicken and how many are holding a rooster. Initially, there were people like me who, had multiple wallets. So the initial readout, I didn't count. But right now that we're about a week away from the mint, there's 2,400 unique wallets holding chickens, and there's still 3,800 unique wallets holding a rooster. And this is down, just so if anybody's worried that people are still spreading their roosters out to multiple wallets, this was as high as 4,600. So I do believe this is a little more accurate now to represent true individual people. So we're on, we could say even if some of these people still haven't consolidated their roosters, that 1,000 new people have entered the space. And over on farmlands, unique holders, there's still 3,200 versus the chickens 2,400. So first of all, this is bringing new people to the space, which brings new money, which brings new sustainability to the project. And then going longer term with the Ignite platform, you will be attracting people who don't even want to play the game. They're just brand new to Avalanche. They said, I love this game on Ethereum. I followed it over here because they were going to actually launch this game I want to play. So what do I got to do? I got to buy these eggs? Okay, I'll buy these eggs so I can get this higher rarity NFT for the game that I want to play. They never touch chicken, and they're going to buy egg, which then continues to put, and then burn egg, which then continues to put this deflationary pressure on an inflationary token. Obviously, we should believe it when we see it, but on paper, it's the kind of thing that sets this project apart, that they are so matured in their establishment in the space that they can start now driving these things that continue to push the utility of that token that's central to their ecosystem, that every egg, that every chicken is going to pump out for eternity. So I think that, to me, that's another piece of what really sets the Chikn project apart. And again, not saying you should jump in and just play chicken, but these are the things that I think are important to look for, is this token that you are going to sit here and spend time spitting out into the ether forever. What are you going to do with it? And that is, to me, the crux of what now going forward I'm really going to look for. I swear this time, before getting into a project.
Yeah, one thing I was going to kind of just mention just briefly that I thought about here, thinking through what you're doing is so important, to just pause and say, how can this play out? What are some possibilities? And don't just think the things you want to think. Think, well, what about this? I think there was multiple occurrences actually in the Roostr mint where I said, hold on, Viper, let's think about this. Let's go through this thought process here. I distinctly remember when the game started and they said, burn some egg and you'll go up in the leaderboard. Now, the leaderboard wasn't working, and that was comical in and of itself. And I waited. I did not burn my egg. Viper went in and he burnt egg right away, which is fine. We didn't burn a lot of egg, but he's like, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. All the roosters I got, I'm going. I'm like, hold on. Let's think through this here. I'm like, and that's when we quickly came to the realization. We're like, this is the eBay game. Viper and I kind of grew up at the onslaught of eBay, the birth of eBay. And in eBay, everybody put stuff up for auction, but it only mattered at the very last second who was the highest bidder. And so you'd get schmucks out there in eBay that would put in their bids, a week before the auction closed. And the real people that wanted to win it didn't touch it until the last 10 seconds. And so in every eBay auction, you had this massive dump of bidding right at the end, which is what the whole mint was about. And it was thinking through that and just stop and think through. Now, I think I ended up burning a little more egg on the Roostrs than Viper did in the end. But I said, I really want to make sure I get this nice rarity. And so we watched and calculated where we needed to put that number. But it just goes to show when you go into something new, stop, look around, get your bearings, think, how can this pan out good? How can it pan out bad? What's the strategy? Are you going to miss some things? Absolutely. And you're going to look back and you go, dang it, why did I spend so much time thinking? I missed it. But I bet you in the long run, you will make wiser decisions that will overpower the few misses that you'll inevitably have. And I think that's a very important takeaway.
Yeah, 100%. And to that point, the other thing along those same lines that I'm planning to do, so to tie this to even a very practical example, is there's another game that I'm early invested in that maybe we'll talk about on a future episode. But the point is I'm way early invested, and there is some extreme potential for this thing to move a lot. And so what I've done is I have literally written down my plan for when this thing starts to move. And that is, I mean, to the price level. Like, when I see this price, sell this much. When I see this price, sell this much. And now at this price, kind of let it ride. Like, I do believe in this protocol, this game, very long term. So I don't want to just sell everything. But I know if I'm sitting there watching this and things start to go, I'll get excited. I'll start to just, think emotionally. I may end up regretting selling too much, or more critically, I may end up not selling because I'm like, no, wait, it's going to go a little bit more. And whatever I was supposed to sell there, if I just hold on for another 5% more or another 10% more, like, it's going to be so much more. Right now, it's not moving. Right now, it's not going anywhere. There are literally zero emotions when I'm formulating that plan. So write the plan down so that way when those emotions are flying, you can be like, this is what I told myself when things were calm. So I should probably listen to that. I mean, stay tuned as to, whether or not that works, but that's at least my current attempt to hold myself in constraint.
Yep. I am very much a contrarian trader. And so I very much tend to trade opposite the general sentiment. And when the market is screaming risk aversion, don't take on any more risk. It's too bad. The waters are bloody. The sharks are out there. Run for the hills. That's exactly the time that I say, I think it might be time to start buying some stuff. That's when you take on the risk. And when the sky is beautiful and clear and everyone's like, yeah, we're going to the moon. And everybody is just like, yeah, there's no worry as risk. Bring it on. That's exactly the time that I'm like, I think this might be the time to sell, because everything is a cycle. It's a pendulum back and forth.
And I would call out that the way you can be best positioned to do exactly what Sprocket just said is to make sure you're getting out when the skies are blue. If you're not getting out when the skies are blue and then things get bloody, like, they're talking to you. It's bloody. You should get out because you didn't when you were supposed to. And so if you get out when it's good, when everybody's, amped up, then you're ready. Hold that. It's going to hurt. I mean, I'm not even speaking from experience because I haven't been that disciplined yet, but I've been learning through these cycles that I fully anticipate that one of these cycles I'm going to catch it end to end, where it's not you're willing to jump into those buys like Sprocket just said, because everybody was yelling, I'm just getting in. This is going to be crazy. This is going to be great. It's going to the moon. And you're sitting there in that moment just holding empty not empty bags, but empty positions. Like, sorry, I'm waiting for the bottom part. And I have a feeling that's emotions in and of itself of like, I don't know, should I jump in? Did I make a mistake? But it's when you commit to the full cycle, see the entire thing, that you're able to make those entries when everybody's fearful, because you're like, this is what I've been waiting for. I had no positions and I'm ready to go. That, you know, I haven't, like I said, haven't been there yet, but I'm looking forward to catching the full cycle one of these times.
Well, that brings us to the end of this week's episode. I hope you guys kind of enjoyed the little dialogue that we had here, the look back. It really is not all perfect and roses, and it's not easy money out there. There's a lot of projects that just aren't going to pan out, and that's why it's all about position sizing, position sizing, position sizing. Have a plan, stick to the plan, be methodical. Only play with money that you're willing to lose. This is a highly speculative environment, and with high speculation comes the probability, or comes the possibility of high reward, but it comes with low probability. And so, you know, we just want to try to keep it real here. Hope you enjoyed some of the analogies that we put up in this episode. There's a lot that you guys can learn and glean from this. We're still learning ourselves, but the more that we talk about this, the more that we go through, the more experience that we have ourselves. So hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys have a great trading week this week. And remember, think outside the block.